Welcome, citizens of the globe, to the Frontend Heroes podcast, where we discuss all things villainous and heroic about the front end of software development. My name is Evan Payne. I'm a senior front-end developer at A.N.G.U.L.A.R, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Scott Francis, a senior front-end engineer at Porsche. How you doing, Scott?
Yeah, really good. Thanks a lot, Evan. Good to see you. Really looking forward to this episode. Currently in the middle of moving apartments, so this is like some real welcome relief just to sit down for an hour and chat about front end instead of thinking about packing boxes and keeping estate agents happy.
You always have so many interesting things going on in your life. So,
Well, I hope it's coming to an end. I hope I'm going to have a very boring second half of the year.
That's good. I want to front load one thing, and that's to ask you, dear listener, to please give us some feedback on the show. Leave a comment or rating wherever you listen to us, or drop us a message on Twitter. We're at Heroes Frontend. We would really like to know how you're liking the format, what else you might be interested in hearing us discuss. So thank you for that. You are the best listeners a podcast could ever have. Today's episode is sponsored by NetCentric, an award-winning Adobe Global Alliance partner and consultancy headquartered in Switzerland with offices all over Europe, as well as in Pune, India. They're currently still hiring for a number of roles, so if you're looking, hop on that train, check them out. We are, as ever, so glad to have their support with this show. So today's guest, you might have seen floating around Twitter with his excellent GIF and meme skills. Brandon Roberts, a web dev developer advocate at Nrwl and a maintainer of NgRx, a state management library for Angular. So, Brandon, can you introduce yourself? And in the spirit of trying something different today, could you also tell us how you define what a front-end developer does these days?
Sure. Yeah, you already alluded to some of it there, but yeah, Brandon Roberts. I'll give my conference spiel. Brandon T Roberts on Twitter. You can follow me there. Like I said, I sling gifts at your face. I try to have some fun there. Just talk about a different number of things, including like web dev sometimes, but we try to keep it casual there. So yeah, that's my main place that I hang out. Also, stream on Twitch, also so under the same name, Brandon T. Roberts. So gotta keep the names consistent. But yeah, what is my definition of front end dev these days? Well, of course, I'll say I'm on the Angular train. So mostly front end dev for me is centered around components and just trying to build uh, nice looking applications and having that like that. I'm more of a I don't know if you call it application infrastructure guy, but trying to get those pieces in place to help you ship stuff faster. So that's mostly what I'm all about is um, helping put those pieces together to build apps. And I think that's a big part of what front end is these days with most developers using frameworks anyway, is trying to get those pieces together to build good UIs.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The episode title I went with today in our superhero theme, not as good as last time perhaps, is Agents of A.N.G.U.L.A.R, referencing Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I guess. I don't know. But this idea of maybe peacekeeping spy network that supports the superheroes and pretty much our superheroes, because I feel like that's what, for one, the open source community is like, and also what the Angular community is like. So I do want to learn a little bit about how you even got involved with Angular
Mm-hmm.
in the first place, and thus how maybe that led to Nrwl as well. Who, for those of you that don't know, Nrwl is a consultancy, but they make some excellent tools for working on enterprise level Angular. I use them in my side project and my work projects. Really great stuff, and a great bunch of people too. So, how did you get started with Angular?
Yeah, so I'll say in a former life, before I did a bunch of Angular stuff and joined all, I started out as a backend developer. Uh, so I did before I started, I was a backend developer. I did some Perl, which is just a long time, maybe dating myself here, but that's fine. Started out with Perl, did some PHP, moved on to doing PHP work, and so I kind of bounced around on different projects doing PHP and did some other projects where I did like C# on the back as a back end dev and some legacy VB.NET development there. So different range of applications that I worked on, and I had never done front end, like mainly front end work before switching to, because I started out with as a backend dev PHP, and I was working on a project that some people may be familiar here with in the U.S. was called America's Army, which is a game basically a game that the military has where you can play. It was a whiteboarding game for football players, and they had a game to like go along with that, or that was one of the products that they had. America's Army was like a first person shooter, but I worked on the back end for that game. Worked on the back end for the website for that game, and from there it was PHP on the back end, AngularJS on the front end, and I was working on the back end side of the application. And this was along when I met my friend Mike Ryan, who was working as like the front end lead on the project at that time, and he was already very familiar with AngularJS, and so I was always interested in trying to get into the front end side of work. So uh, I started doing some work in AngularJS in addition to doing the back end work, and I liked it a lot. So I eventually transitioned off of back end development altogether and moving all the work that I did into the front end. This was AngularJS was around 1.5 or 1.6, I believe. But yeah, this was like a critical time when Angular 1.x was, I want to say like being sunsetted, or this was when they were starting to ramp up for like the Angular 2 alphas and
Right.
betas and all that. So uh, I was building an Angular JS. We had a little bit of we had a lot of flexibility on the job where we could build with Angular also. So we were like trying to ship production apps with with the Angular betas and alphas of Angular 2 at the time, and just trying to get familiar with the framework. So that was at least how I initially got into the Angular ecosystem as a developer, in a way, even before I started like contributing and going through that side of things.
What made you want to switch from the back end to the front end? Like you, like, was it actually like seeing Angular, or was it something that you wanted to do beforehand?
Yeah, I think it was Angular JS was a big part of that because it was at least one of the ones that I had the most exposure to, even before I started, um, like knowing about other frameworks. That I had done some stuff with jQuery, because most of the things that I did as a backend developer was, like I said, everything was processed on the server, and then we would kind of sprinkle in some jQuery here and there. So we weren't actually building the whole UI. Everything was still built in PHP land, um, but we weren't like shipping like a lot of JavaScript to the browser and letting and building things from there. And that was kind of where I got. Um, it was one of those moments where I think a lot of me and a lot of other developers were saw that the Angular JS homepage at the time like had the two-way data binding like on the homepage where you could kind of fiddle around with it itself, and I was like, okay, that's that's pretty cool. I didn't have any like practical use for it, but the Angular JS was definitely one of the things that I saw. I was like that I knew I wanted to try it, even though I didn't have like a real project to throw it at, but it always intrigued me of that being able to flip those things on the page as opposed
Hmm.
to like writing the back end code, everything all in the back end PHP code. So definitely influence there.
Cool.
How did you go from kind of working on a sites or sites that used Angular to maybe being more involved in building out the library
Hmm.
and satellite libraries around it? I feel like that is a very different mindset in general, right?
Hmm.
Coming up with like building any kind of library for multiple people to use requires you to do this kind of mental gymnastics of efficiency, but also like
Yeah.
you don't write it how you would if you were just building it for running in your own application necessarily. So I don't know. I'm just curious why you gravitated that way after a while.
Yeah. So the the thing that led me to like going from like just building things with Angular to trying to contribute to Angular itself was trying to get involved and trying to do basically do more in open source. I have like built a lot of things and used a lot of open source projects and wanted to get involved in some capacity, but hadn't really thought about or hadn't had a project that I could really like jump into and get involved in. Like I said, getting involved with the Angular project early in the betas was a good opportunity for me to try to get in and contribute there. And like the thing that got me really involved in the Angular betas and things was the router, because that was one of the things that in Angular JS anyway, that a lot of developers didn't use the first party one that came with Angular JS. They always UI router was the default library that you would use even if you were shipping Angular JS apps. So I got involved because I basically took it as like a personal challenge to try to make the first party Angular router as good as it could be, so that when you it kind of built into that model of wanting to use everything that you needed for Angular was already there, that you could just get installed quickly and get running with everything that you needed. So I started down that journey to like basically like diving into GitHub issues and digging through source code and building examples, um, to try to understand how the router worked at the time and to try to help people that were doing the same thing I was doing, which was trying to get it, like apply it to their projects. And in doing that, I was approached by his name's Ward Bell, which he's a big figure in the Angular community also. He approached me and asked me if I wanted to join the docs team. So that was my first pass at contributing more directly to the framework and actually helping write the documentation and things that would help developers use Angular in that way. And so I did the docs for a while, and in addition to like working on the docs, we had also me and Mike had also gotten involved with NgRx early, like very early on. And one of the things that we had built out with um, NgRx was another router uh, that wasn't. This was alongside the Angular router that was getting developed at the time. So we were kind of like on these like parallel paths of like contributing to Angular, trying to help other developers, and building out some of these libraries that kind of grew as we went along. But yeah, the the building, like I said, building libraries is a lot different than like trying to ship with something, because I guess you have less control over what that library does or how it's used, and um, you're not necessarily focused as much on the you don't have to worry about like you're on the other side of the impact, kind of the impact of that, how that library works. And you're working off, sometimes you're working off what other people think how the library should work, or like their ideas and goals for it. And you kind of have to fit that into what you're doing. So it's definitely a different feel when you switch over to building the libraries themselves. And then you're on the side of having to make those decisions about whether you should add this to your library, especially if it's open source and a lot of people start using it. Um, you run into a lot of different decisions that you have to make. And I'll say that decisions that I had to make that I wasn't used to making before, because it was what NgRx was one of my first, I would say, significant projects that I worked on that a lot of people wanted to use and contribute to. So, and it came along with, like I said, a lot of decisions and things, a lot of decisions and thinking about how that impacts other people when we're working on it. So
I,
definitely a different feel.
I do want to come back to maybe your story around NgRx in specific, but I feel like we have a opportunity to discuss something maybe more about what your current role is as developer advocate as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this idea of when you get into using certain libraries and certain complex things, state management being a great example.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the front end lead on a project and you've decided, you've done some research and you're like, okay, this seems like an appropriate tool, then as we've discussed previously on the show, it's your responsibility to communicate that in the right way to your team and get them on board, right?
Yep.
And I wonder how that's evolved for you over time, like what you found in terms of, giving conference talks and finding the right mental models to communicate these very complex topics. And do those in turn then shape your progress on developing the libraries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as far as my conference talks have definitely evolved over time because as I've gotten more comfortable with doing them, but my the way I like to approach things is always about trying to help. At the end of the day, I'm just trying to help other developers. So everything that I talk about in conference talks is something that I've done or something that I've run into that I'm trying to make that easier for the person who is new to that library or new to that tool that they're using. So uh, the and those are my main motivations. I'm always trying to. I always wanted my conference talks to be as if I'm like we're pulling up a chair and we're like kind of like pair programming together, and I'm trying to explain how this thing works and how we can get the most out of how we can get the most out of the library that we're using. And the other side of that is uh, and I take that same approach in building libraries also about thinking about how users are going to like if I was a user, how would I expect this to work, or it would and how would I explain this to other people on the team to get buy-in, because I think that's a good part of or a big part of the libraries that we choose is like how does it work, is there good documentation around it? Because that's one thing that I'm really big on as far as documentation goes. Um, and like I said, getting that buy-in and helping other people be successful with that product. So I've always been been always very conscious about trying to, like I said, meet people where they are, and all that goes into like what I've transitioned into doing as a developer advocate is help developers use something that I use personally, and maybe I have more experience in it, maybe I don't. Um, Help them to be successful with it, and help them to grow and like do the same thing that I wanted, do the same kind of some of the same things that I intend to do, which is be successful with it, and then help someone else be successful with it also. So those are my driving um, forces behind like projects that I work on. Like if I could contribute to a bunch more projects, I would, but sometimes you just don't have the. I haven't figured out the magic bandwidth bullet yet for that. So, but yeah, those are the at least what I think of as far as how I try to help people ship things, and then how we turn around and turn those things to put them back into the library or the product to make them better. Because like NgRx, just as an example, is a case of a project that has directly evolved over time because of the things that we've used it for and the things that people who use the library that we talk to have used it for. So uh, and I think that's a healthy like relationship to have with uh, framework authors and as well as users. Because if you just stay on one side of, oh, if you just stay on either side, then I think there's a bit of a disconnect there. But the more like I said, you stay in tune with what the users want and kind of keep that balance there, and I think it definitely helps.
So would you say then that like this kind of approach? I mean, I think it's a great approach. Would you say that that helps you to actually like, evolve the work that you're doing? If you're creating a library, if you go out and you talk about this at a
Hmm.
conference, or you are like as a role of a dev advocate, then just teaching that to people like helps you see how like your product could evolve, how the library
Hmm.
could evolve, and make changes for that.
Yeah, definitely, and that's is much of what my goals are, is to help other, like I want to reach the people who aren't using it currently, of course, because we want to like have more people use like the open source stuff that we build, but also take care of the people that are using it and try to make it as best we can for them. Like I said, keeping that, like I said, there's always those two things that you have to balance as far as what your goals for the library are and what your goals for your users are. But I still consider myself a user at the end of the day. So um, it definitely helps. Like I said, it helps me to be able to build stuff with it and see where the pain points are, uh, as opposed to just being the person who's shipping the library and maybe having just kind of having that high level view of things, and um, not necessarily building things with it, but treating it more as like more theoretical, I would say, than like practical. And
Hmm.
I like to be in the middle of like the theory and the practice of
Hmm.
shipping.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you say that because I think that is for me the making or breaking of a community that can grow up around an open source tool. And
Hmm.
early days Angular didn't have that. I mean, the people involved were excellent, were very intelligent,
Hmm.
but they must have been so focused on what they were doing inside the library that the
Hmm.
using of it didn't often come into play, or if it did, it was literally to build the demo site or something like that. That often
Yeah.
happens in early days. And if you want people to, or if you want to understand your user base, you have to be a user as well.
Yeah.
um, do you this is more about you personally, or your work, I guess, but do you have specific things you do you start a lot of new projects to try stuff out? Do you do consultancy work as part of your job? Like, how do you get more projects to try these things and approaches out on?
Yeah. I've done a little bit of both. I've done some consulting work, just here and there, because like I said, I like to see how other people use the project, which is usually why I like ask a lot of questions about how are people using it, because you don't, like, even working for a consultancy, you still don't get access to every project. You get, access, maybe if you're on a long term project, you may be on that one for a while, or maybe a couple of small ones. Um, but I always like to see how other people are using the project, whether that be consulting, or if somebody like sends me a message and asks me to help them out of some issue that they're having. Um, I try to make myself available to at least be able to see what they're doing, or um, see if they're having some kind of pain point that I didn't notice before, or some way that worked, something that they done that works for them that I hadn't noticed or hadn't thought of. So uh, it's more of a mix of those things that has come up for me to try to, and like also my other side projects. I don't I don't blanket throw NgRx at everything, but but the things but I do end up using it pretty frequently because it aligns with the things that I'm trying to build. So, and it works for those things. So it's like I said, it's a mix of the different ways of, like I said, I've done some consulting, and most of those were, so it was so that I could um, help someone that needed some help on a project, and kind of see what they were doing, whether they were new to NgRx or um, even familiar with it, and just trying to iron out some of the things that weren't clear. So yeah.
Um, so, being very immersed in the Angular side of things, do you still stay on top of the rest of the landscape? And current kind of hot topics are maybe like Astro or 11T, these kind of static site generators and things
Hmm.
of that nature. Or, React is always super popular. I get it.
Yeah.
Do you keep on top of those?
I try to like, and this is part of what intrigues me as like a developer advocate, is being able to try those new things that are coming out and kind of see how the things that I use would apply in those situations. Like, I've heard a lot about 11T and heard about Astro Build and some of these other tools that are out there. And it's exciting. It's a treadmill to say the least,
For
to try
sure.
to keep up with all those things. But I do I do want to try some of those other things more. I tend to joke about, at least on Twitter anyway, about how React is and how it compares with some of the things that Angular does, and some things I wish Angular did. Um, but yeah, I do try to stay on top of that, even though it's a mountain of things to do. But I'm always interested in learning how other like frameworks and other people, what their like vision of how they build things are. So, and I'm always looking to sprinkle new routers in other places. So, if any of those ever come up, then if the opportunity is there, I might jump on board there also. But that'll probably be unlikely given the amount of stuff that I have to do already. So, but yeah, I do definitely want to keep up with the other uh, ecosystems and see how those are like going forward, even compared and contrast to Angular anyway.
Yeah, I think that the difficulty that a lot of developers probably face is understanding what these tools that come out actually are best used for.
Hmm.
Obviously the answer is always, well, it depends, but you need information, right?
Hmm.
If you're saying, let's compare Astro versus Angular, you can't, as in, people have been saying, oh, well, this is great because I don't have to you build a single page app when that's not what I need. It's like, well, actually, that is what I need. I need an application. That's what I'm building. I'm not building a static web page. It
Hmm.
is, I can have an entry point that is my static web page. I use that on my side project. Like, I build it, it's on Netlify as a static entry point, but then the app itself, it's no good to me to have 100 web pages or 100 index.html files built. I
Hmm.
don't need that. They need to log in and use the app. So you do sometimes need a single page app. And I think
Yep.
that nuance of that gets lost in a lot of these which tools should I use discussions that happen online.
Yeah. So, which tool should I use, and what's hot? What's the hot new tool? What's the hot new tool that I should use? Uh, and like I said, I think you said it too. We get caught up in the new shiny things, but at the end of the day, it depends on what you actually need and what the right tool for that is. And some preference does come into that, because some people just prefer Angular over React or Vue or whichever, to build things with. Or like I said, some people just want to ship static sites, so they pick the tool that gets closest to that. And I don't see an issue with that, picking the right
Yeah.
tool, as long as you're like I say, you're getting the right information and making that decision. But even like if it's your own projects and things, I mean, you can do what you want. You can switch today. It's not like you're bound to that tool or anything. But uh, it's different. I guess it's different when you're doing it for work versus side projects. But yeah, you still have that choice.
That's the beauty of side projects, right? Like that's your
Hmm.
playground. Like you can, if you want to make a bad decision on like, oh, I'm going to use this framework, even though like the internet might howl at you for making the wrong choice. Like, come on, it's your project. Like you can do what you like. I mean, like that's the playground. So why not?
Yeah, why not? If I want to, ship a full page, a single page app with jQuery, I can still do that today. It might not be a good decision, but I can still do it. And if
That's
it's
right.
my project, who's gonna stop me from doing it?
Well, if
Nobody's
you
gonna
put it
come
live,
in
if you
with.
put it live, like Twitter probably will stop you from doing it. But
Twitter's gonna tell you to stop doing everything. So basically,
oh yeah,
whoever is
that's true.
talking,
That is true. That is
whoever
true.
is talking at the time. So yeah,
Do you mind if we talk a little bit about NX DevTools?
yeah, sure.
So I'm pretty well versed, so I want to again gang up on Scott about something
Yeah,
and be
teach
like,
me,
Scott,
teach me.
you need to understand this. But I'm interested in you working for the company that makes it kind of, if you have a good elevator pitch for what use case it solves, we can maybe expound from there.
Yeah, so my elevator pitch for NX is centered around monorepos, and it's three main areas. It's uh, caching, um, only running caching, only running what you need to run at particular times, and the tooling that goes along with it. Those are like the main three things, and we can kind of expand on those things. But uh, like I said, the big things are the effective commands, the caching, and like the tooling, generators and executors that come along with it. That kind of to me separate it from other like monorepo tools. Of course, it's NX itself is a build framework as we call it, open source build framework. But to me, it's the pieces around it um, that make it exceptional as opposed to just handling one particular thing. So, but yeah, we can talk
So
about that more.
yeah, no, but maybe to stay high level on the monorepo part of why you would even go for something like NX or Lerna. Um,
Hmm.
my understanding of it is that when your organization has multiple apps, but you want to maintain a sort of unity and control over the development process, how they interact with each other, it
Hmm.
can be easier to just group them all into just one large repository, one Git repository. And when you do that, it can get out of hand really fast.
Yep.
I mean, I never had one. I've only ever used an NX one, so I don't really know the pain points, but I'm guessing there were a lot, which is why this was developed to begin with.
Yeah, NX is another one of those things that has evolved over time. Like NX initially started as some extensions for Angular, but like I said, then grew into a tool for monorepos. And the like you said, the thing that you're going to run into is if you're putting multiple applications or libraries into like a single place, like just putting them there isn't enough, because you don't have like the adequate tooling to be able to manage and coordinate all the pieces that go into your monorepo. Because like if you're using something like Lerna, then it's going to take care of like the dependency management, and you can kind of set up like a lot of ad hoc scripts and things. But um, NX kind of take NX takes that a step further so that you can manage multiple applications and manage the libraries around them in a way that keeps your monorepo like healthy, and also gives you the tooling to like orchestrate the like building all of those apps or only building a subset of what you need in that monorepo. So uh, the the monorepo part of it is, and even that part aside, like building applications with it, it helps you to think about how, like when you think about the architecture of like your runtime app, you do have to take some time and think about like the architecture of how it's structured in a place where there are going to be a lot of other applications and libraries also. So it helps gives you that same kind of structure and flexibility around how you put the pieces of your app together in a single place, and helps you scale that up across, like I said, multiple apps, multiple libraries, multiple teams, even multiple organizations. So I think that's the biggest benefit of it is like if you've already like bought into the monorepo approach, so you need to be able to like scale up to however many people or teams that you have to work on those projects.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I use it even for smaller projects because, again, the core way that it breaks it down
Mm-hmm.
is you have your apps and you have your libs. And if you work off of the concepts that your apps are basically as like lightweight as possible, and you move
Mm-hmm.
all your sort of logic and styles and all that stuff over into your libs, then those libs become one, very self-contained. But then when you run your build for your app or your second app, or as it balloons into something else, a third app, the NX tooling provides you this dependency graph that says, oh, app B is actually only using this library. And
Mm-hmm.
in your current set of commits, you made no changes to that library. So we don't need to build app B again, which is great. You're suddenly
Yep.
your GitLab or your GitHub pipeline takes a quarter of the time to build. That for me is the goal, but it's hard to get everyone involved because you have that monorepo and you've
Yeah.
got the backenders have their app, and then you've got the front end that has their two apps, and trying to get everyone finally to unify around that. If you're not doing it from day one, that can be a time consuming process. But once you're in
Yeah.
it, it's good.
Yeah, definitely. So, like you said, and I've done it, this way in the past. You have three project, or you have two projects at least. You have your like back end and front end app, and like they aren't in. They're usually in separate repos. They have separate release cycles, and they're built separately. They could be using different technologies, and all those things. All those things are still true, even if you have them in a monorepo. It just gives you, at least for me, like most of the things that I build these days are all JavaScript based. So um, having those things together gives you a more, like, I like to talk about like collaboration a lot when I talk about like NX and what it does. It helps you to get that collaborative piece together about how you build these different things together, back end services, front end apps, build them all together and share the pieces between them. And like I said, you have to have that collaboration across teams, that even if they're building different things, but you want them to feel as if they're being built together. So having that separation of only testing certain things or only testing certain areas based on what's changed is um, definitely works out and helps, as if you were just, as opposed to just putting all your code in one place and running all your tests and things that, based on a change that might not even impact half of your applications that are in there. So, and I've, like I said, it's another of those things working as a consultancy, you get to see that firsthand of uh, bringing all those things into one place and working on an app with 300 plus people on it that are constantly opening PRs to different areas. And just think, if you had all that in the same, like let's say you just had it all in one bucket, and you have to run all the tests for everything that ever changed for 300 plus people or 50 plus teams. Just imagine how that kind of drags down the experience for you and the experience for the other developers, the DevOps team, they're all about trying to get those numbers down. So um, it it definitely accumulates over time, having to coordinate that. And that's, like I said, that's what the strength of, to me, what the strength of NX is like I said, partitioning out your applications into smaller units and like only running tests or whatever against certain parts of the certain things that have changed. Um, and then the caching part is like kind of like the icing on top for me, to where you get that uh, you've already built something, you've already tested something, so I don't have to go back and then test it also, because we're running against the same set of code. So yeah.
So what do you think, Scott?
I,
Sound
I
like
was
a
just
good thing?
I was just thinking that's incredible because last week we were having discussions about with an infrastructure team who
Hmm.
wanted us to run a quick smoke test for when they had done a release on like another product that was sharing our platform, but the 15 minutes that they were allocating was kind of like who says this is going to be 15 minutes? Like this is going to be like 15 minutes to just think about it, and then
Hmm.
like hours to actually like run through these tests. So I can immediately see the benefit of it. I think it is something that I think it's something that we're all really faced with. Like in any project, any product, we're all faced with this. Like how do we first like automate the way that we test things? How do we like make sure that we only test what we need to, and we're really confident about those tests. We're really confident like in what we're releasing. So yeah, I immediately see the benefit of it. Like, and it's quite timely with the discussions that we were having last week.
Hmm. Yeah, it was like, what if you could walk into like your DevOps people's meeting and say, "Hey, I know how we can cut the CI time in half." And I was like, "Well, how are we going to do that?" Well, split the app in half, split a part of the app off from the rest of it as far as the testing and things go. And we can say, if you only change this half, we'll only run half of those half of the tests. And that
Mm-hmm.
could be just a conversation starter. Oh, okay, well, let's break that down further. And if we break it into smaller pieces, then we'll know that only these particular tests need to be run based on those changes. So it's something that you can incrementally adopt over time, that you'll immediately see like the benefits of it. Like, let's say if you have 2,000 tests for some reason, and now you only need to run half of them. Well, unless those 2,000 unless only that half was like eating up the the bulk of the test time, you're immediately like cutting that time in half. So
Yeah, totally. You know what? You completely like stuff like this always blows me away with like when you think back like just a few years, like how much like, things move on, that there's
hmm.
products like to actually do this kind of thing and like make the whole process like so much slicker and so much more efficient. Like it doesn't like I've said, we always say like everybody involved in like in the industry is amazed at how quickly things move on, but
Hmm.
then like things really move fast. Like and like to have people actually thinking, right, how can we reduce this much time? How can we reduce like the blocking time that development teams are facing? It's like it's absolutely incredible. I'm still amazed by it.
It's the same thing we continually talk about because we bring awesome people onto the show that are involved in these. It's solving some of the meta problems that come up
Hmm.
that you don't really need to solve if you have a DevOps team. But if you don't have a DevOps team, you're never like you can't solve that on your own. And having these library authors and these frameworks and things that come up that kind of get that out of the way for you. We were talking about Netlify previously and a lot of the things that they did, which just now you don't, as a solitary developer, you don't have to deal with that on your own anymore, or rather, someone has
Hmm.
done the kind of the bulk of the work there, and that's what is making front end eat the world, in my opinion. Is
Hmm.
you get to a certain stage, you're able to build a little bit higher, and then the meta problems start being solved. It's a really good place to be.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that I've always wanted to focus on is helping, like I said, helping people ship faster. So, or getting to a place where you can move some of those things that, frankly, some of us don't care about out of the way, so that you can focus on the things that you do care about, which is, like I said, whether it's shipping UIs or shipping services or whatever the thing may be. Try to get to that point as quickly as possible because, like I said, that's where you want to be most of the time and not slogging through infrastructure if that's not your thing. So, yeah.
Nice. So we're getting to that time in the show where we're moving towards the close, but first we go into our segment, True Hero. In this segment, we like to highlight a few true front-end heroes that are working across the planet and to thank them for all that they do. So this time around, Brandon, you've nominated Brian Douglas. Can you tell us a bit about why you made that particular choice?
Yeah, Brian Douglas, actually met him. Um, I met him at a conference a couple of years ago, and I didn't actually know who he was, but he is a developer advocate at GitHub, and he has definitely helped me in my like journey of trying to get into DevRel. But he works at GitHub. He does a lot of he helps a lot of other people who are in the industry also, whether it be writing blog posts, sharing information, uh, trying to move, trying to help other people in the industry be successful, which is, like I said, along the same lines of things that I'm doing. So he's always given me good advice and always been open and available uh, to help me along this journey. So he's definitely one of the people that I wanted to shout out there. If you look for him on GitHub, his name is Brian Douglas. If you look for B Dougie Yo, you'll find him pretty easily. So definitely
Nice.
give a shout out to him.
Perfect. Yeah, Brian, thank you for all that you do. Keep up the good work. Keep up the inspiration. We very much appreciate it. Now, lastly, any proper hero is a well-rounded one, and so we want to share some simple musical and/or other picks. Scott, what's the favorite thing you've been listening to lately?
I've actually got a music one this time, but it's like super old. Well, super old. Yeah, it is super old. It's from 2006. The band is Hot Chip, and the album's called The Warning. And I was listening to it because I love the song over and over. And was in a retro or something like that. And we were like, and uh, they said, "Oh, just put one track on." Like everyone just put a track on, and I suddenly thought of over and over. I thought I'm going to put that on there, and I realized afterwards, like putting a song that says like over and over and over and over, like a monkey with a miniature symbol, like was really like not painting a good like vibe for a
That's
retro
retro.
for a sprint. Like, and the PO was like, "Man, what are you telling me?" I'm like, "I
Yeah.
like this song."
You're
And
telling
so
me
I
this
went,
is never going to end.
yeah, yeah. I'm in product now. Like it's not a project, it's product. Like this is never coming to an end. Um, yeah, so I went back and listened to the whole album, and it's really, really good. Even from 2006, it's still an amazing album.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Brandon. How about you?
Cool. I'm going to do what I normally do and joke about Kanye West, whose new album is supposed to come out soon, and he had a listening party. So I'm going to give a music choice that hasn't even been released yet because he gave a listening party this past week for his new album called Donda, which I believe was his mom's name. And I was expecting to be able to listen to that album this past Friday because it was supposed to be released at midnight, but it did not get released. And so I woke up Friday morning ready to get my Kanye on all day long, and it wasn't there. So I'm gonna take this opportunity to take a shot at Kanye and tell him to finish that album so I can listen to it properly and not fuzzy recordings on the internet that people who recorded with their cell phone at the event were pushing out there. So that's my pick.
All right. I appreciate that. And I'm sure he totally listens to the podcast. So
He's a
Yeah,
big
sure.
listener. He's a big listener. I saw him tweeting.
Somebody tweet at Kanye West and tell him about this podcast that he needs to get his album out.
All right. From my side, I've gone down a train. I know I'm 7 years late for it, but there's a band called Snarky Puppy, which is mind-blowingly good, and they have a live album, We Like It Here. Obviously, if you've heard of them, you'll know the track Lingus. I just have it on repeat, and the whole album's really good, but that one track and the solo, oh man, like mind-blowingly good players. The drummer, Larnell Lewis, is just incredible. So yeah, I heartily recommend check that out if you're into complex kind of weird jazz stuff. It's good, really good. All right, so it looks like that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you should like, heart, or star us in your podcatcher of choice. Reviews and ratings are how the fancy algorithms help people find our content, and the power to help is within you. If you have any questions or topics you want covered in our next episode, as I mentioned at the start, send us a tweet at Heroes Frontend and we'll add it to our list. And until next time, heroes, remember, with great front-end power comes great responsibility. See you next time.